Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today. The other day, I thought. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Well, this time we have a science fiction double feature. One question I get asked all the time is, what do I think is the real origin of science fiction? Was it H.G. Wells or perhaps Jules Verne? The right answer is yes, but with a huge side note. While those guys invented it, I have no doubt that the pulp mags of the 1930s through 50s perfected it. In the wacky world of publishing, the pulp mag stands out as the quirky cousin to the traditional novel, but with a flair for the dramatic. Born in the early 20th century, pulp magazines were a riotous explosion of creativity and adventure, serving as the colorful antidote to the dreary monotony of everyday life. With their lurid covers and dazzling tales, they quickly found their way into the hearts and minds of readers everywhere. The pulp magazine got its name from the cheap wood pulp paper that it was printed on, which was about as luxurious as the stuff you'd find in a grade school art class. But what these magazines lacked in paper quality, they more than made up for with amazing products like thrilling wonder stories and, yes, the shadow knows. And let's not forget about the covers, which often featured damsels in distress, rugged heroes, and aliens with poor fashion choices. Imagine, if you will, the scene. It's the 1920s, and an unsuspecting reader picks up a copy of Amazing Stories. Within its pages, they find the tales of daring adventurers, mad scientists, and the occasional talking gorilla. Here, the mundane becomes magnificent, and reality takes a back seat to imagination. For a dime, you could journey to Mars or join a detective solving a case so convoluted that even Sherlock Holmes would need a strong cup of tea to deal with it. Pulp writers were a breed unto themselves. Often laboring under the intense pressure of looming deadlines and caffeine-induced jitters, these maestros of mayhem churned out stories faster than you could say, extraterrestrial invasion. And their paychecks? Well, they were much like the paper quality, not exactly top tier. Yet, their passion for storytelling knew no bounds, and their efforts paved the way for many of today's blockbuster genres. From science fiction to hard-boiled detective tales, pulps covered every conceivable genre, often mixing them like a mad scientist in a literary laboratory. Why settle for a simple mystery when you can have a detective who moonlights as a vampire hunter solving crimes in a dystopian future. The sky was not the limit for these storytellers. Rather, it was merely a starting point. Alas, all good things must come to an end, and so did the reign of the pulp magazine. By the 1950s, television and comic books began to capture the imagination of the masses, and the once thriving pulp industry started to fade into the annals of history. Yet their legacy lives on, for without the wild and wonderful world of pulps, we might never have discovered the joys of superheroes, space operas, or the detective noir. So, the next time you find yourself reading a tale of intergalactic intrigue or brooding detectives, spare a thought for the humble pulp magazine, because without its zany influence, who knows where our imaginations would be today? Well, there are my thoughts for this time. I hope you found them entertaining. All ideas expressed in this segment are mine and fall under the Unstable Expression Copyright Act and are therefore subject to ridicule or praise as the case may be. Feel free to offer any feedback and thoughts that you might have on this subject at the main website. I would love to hear what you think. This time on As Read By, we have a science fiction classic from the pulp mag era. There are many things that could go wrong in space, but one that is more feared than any is the threat of picking up a new disease. Even during the space age of the 60s and 70s, astronauts were held in quarantine to ensure that they hadn't picked up something while up there. That is what our story is about today. As we prepare to travel to Mars, I have to wonder what the disease protocols will be like. After all, would we want to catch the Martian flu? Our story is titled Operation Distress. It was written by Lester del Rey and first appeared in Galaxy Science Fiction, August of 1951. It is read for us by Edmund Bloxam.
Operation Distress by Lester del Rey. Bell Adams was halfway back from Mars when he noticed the red rash on his hands. He'd been reaching for one of the few remaining tissues to cover a sneeze, while scratching vigorously at the base of his neck. Then he saw the red spot, and his hand halted, while all desire to sneeze gasped out of him. He sat there, 5 feet 7 inches of lean muscle and bronzed skin, sweating and staring, while the blonde hair on the back of his neck seemed to stand on end. Finally, he dropped his hand and pulled himself carefully erect. The cabin in the spaceship was big enough to permit turning around, but not much more, and with the ship cruising without power, there was almost no gravity to keep him from overshooting his goal. He found the polished plate that served as a mirror and studied himself. His eyes were puffy, his nose was red, and there were other red splotches and marks on his face. Whatever it was, he had it bad. Pictures went through his head, all unpleasant. He'd been only a kid when the men came back from the South Pacific in the last war, but an uncle had spent years dying of some weird disease that the doctors couldn't identify. That had been from something caught on Earth. What would happen when the disease was from another planet? It was ridiculous. Mars had no animal life, and even the thin lichen-like plants were sparse and tiny. A man couldn't catch a disease from a plant. Even horses didn't communicate their ills to men. Then Bill remembered gangrene and cancer, which could attack any life, apparently. He went back to the tiny Geiger-Müller counter, but there was no sign of radiation from the big atomic motor that powered the ship. He stripped his clothes off, spotting more of the red marks breaking out, but finding no sign of parasites. He hadn't really believed it anyhow. They wouldn't account for the sneezing and sniffles, or the puffed eyes and burning inside his nose and throat. Dust, maybe. Mars had been dusty, a waste of reddish sand and desert silt that made the Sahara seem like paradise, and it had settled on his spacesuit to come in through the airlocks with him. But if it contained some irritant, it should have been worse on Mars than now. He could remember nothing annoying, and he'd turned on the tiny, compact little static dust traps, in any case, before leaving, to clear the air. He went back to one of the traps now and ripped the cover off it. The little motor purred briskly. The plastic rods turned against fur brushes, while a wiper cleared off any dust they picked up. There was no dust he could see. The traps had done their work. Some plant irritant, like poison ivy. No, he'd always worn his suit. Mars had an atmosphere, but it wasn't anything a man could breathe long. The suit was put on and off with automatic machine grapples, so he couldn't have touched it. The rash seemed to get worse on his body as he looked at it. This time, he tore one of the tissues in quarters as he sneezed. The little supply was almost gone. There was never space enough for much beyond essentials in a spaceship, even with the new atomic drive. As he looked for spots, the burning in his nose seemed to increase. He dropped back to the pilot seat, cursing. 2 months of being cramped up in this cubicle, sweating out the trip to Mars without knowing how the new engine would last. 3 weeks on Mars, mapping frantically to cover all the territory he could, and planting little flags 100 miles apart. Now a week on the trip back at high acceleration most of the way. And this. He'd expected adventure of some kind. Mars, though, had proved as interesting as a sandpile, and even the canals had proved to be only minimal striations, invisible from the ground. He looked for something to do, but found nothing. He'd developed his films the day before, after carefully cleaning the static traps and making sure the air was dust-free. He'd written up the accounts, and had been coasting along on the hope of getting home to a bath, a beer, and a few bull sessions before he began to capitalize on being the first man to reach another planet beyond the moon. He caught on full acceleration again, more certain of his motors than of himself. He'd begun to notice the itching yesterday. Today he was breaking out in the rash. How long would whatever was coming take? God, he might die from something as humiliating and undramatic as this. It hadn't hit him before, fully. There was no knowing about diseases from other planets. Men had developed immunity to the germs found on Earth, but just as smallpox had proved so fatal to the Indians, and syphilis to Europe when they first hit, there was no telling how wildly this might progress. It might go away in a day, or it might kill him just as quickly. He was figuring his new orbit on a tiny calculator. In 2 days at this acceleration, he could reach radar distance of Earth. In 4, he could land. The tubes might burn out in continuous firing, but the other way, it'd be 2 weeks making a landing, and most diseases he could remember seemed faster than that. Bill wiped the sweat off his forehead, scratched at other places that were itching, and stared down at the small disk of Earth. There were doctors there, and brother, he'd need them fast. Things were a little worse when the first squeals came from the radar 2 days later. He'd run out of tissues, and his nose was a continual drip, while breathing seemed almost impossible. He was running some fever, too, though he had no way of knowing how much. He cut his receiver in, punched out the code on his key. The receiver pipped again at him, bits of message getting through, but unclearly. There was no response to his signals. He checked his chronometer and flipped over the micro pages of his ephemeris. The big radar at Washington was still out of line with him, and the signals had cut through too much air to come clearly. It should be good in another hour. But right now, an hour seemed longer than a normal year. He checked the dust tray again, tried figuring out other orbits, managed to locate the moon, and scratched. 15 minutes. There was no room for pacing up and down. He pushed the back down from the pilot seat, lowered the table, and pulled out his bunk. He remade it, making sure all the corners were perfect. Then he folded it back and lifted the table and seat. That took less than 5 minutes. His hands were shaking worse when the automatic radar signals began to come through more clearly. It wasn't an hour, but he could wait no longer. He opened the key and began to send. It would take 15 seconds for the signal to reach Earth, and another quarter minute for an answer, even if an operator was on duty. Half a minute later, he found one was. "Earth to Mars, Rocket 1. Thank God you're ahead of schedule. If your tubes hold out, crowd them. 2 other nations have ships out now. The UN has ruled that whoever comes back first with mapping surveys can claim the territory mapped. We're rushing the construction, but we need the ship for the second run if we're to claim our fair territory. Oh, hell, congratulations. It started hammering at his key before they finished, giving the facts on the tubes, which were standing up beyond all expectations. Get a doctor ready, a bunch of them, he finished. I seem to have picked up something like a disease. There was a long delay before an answer came this time, more than 5 minutes. The hand on the key was obviously different, slower and not as steady. What symptoms, Adams? Give all details. He began, giving all the information he had, from the first itching through the rash and the fever. Again, longer this time, the main station hesitated. Anything I can do about it now? Bill asked finally. And how about having those doctors ready? We're checking with medical, the signals answered. Here's the report. Not enough data. Could be anything. Dozens of diseases like that. Nothing you can do except try saltwater gargle and spray. You've got stuff for that. Wash off rash with soap and hot water, followed by some of your hypo. We'll get a medical kit up to the moon for you. He let that sink in, then clicked back. The moon? You think you can land here with whatever you've got, man? There's no way of knowing how contagious it is. And keep an hourly check with us. If you pass out, we'll try to get someone out in a moon rocket to pick you up. But you can't risk danger of infecting the whole planet. You're quarantined on the moon. We'll send up landing instructions later, not even for lunar base, but where there will be no chance of contamination for others. You didn't really expect to come back here, did you, Adams? He should have thought of it. He knew that. And he knew that the words from Earth weren't as callous as they sounded. Down there, men would be sweating with him, going crazy trying to do something. But they were right. Earth had to be protected first. Bill Adams was only 1 out of 2.5 billion, even if he had reached a planet before any other man. Yeah, it was fine to be a hero, but heroes shouldn't menace the rest of the world. Logically, he knew they were right. That helped him get his emotions under control. Where do you want me to put down? Tycho, it isn't hard to spot for radar-controlled delivery of supplies to you, but it's a good 700 miles from lunar base. And look, we'll try to get a doctor to you, but keep us informed if anything slips. We need those maps, if we can find a way to sterilize them. Okay, he acknowledged. And tell the cartographers there are no craters, no intelligence, and only plants about half an inch high. Mars stinks. They'd already been busy, he saw, as he teetered down on his jets for a landing on Tycho. Holding control was the hardest job he'd ever done. A series of itchings cropped out just as the work got tricky, when he could no longer see the surface and had to go by feel. But somehow he made it. Then he relaxed and began an orgy of scratching. And he thought there was something romantic about being a hero. The supplies that had already been sent up by the superfast unmanned missiles would give him something to do, at least. He moved back the 2 feet needed to reach his developing tanks and went through the process of spraying and gargling. It was soothing enough while it went on, but it offered only momentary help. Then his stomach began showing distress signs. He fought against it, tightening up. It did no good. His hasty breakfast of just black coffee wanted to come up, and did, giving him barely time to make the little booth. He washed his mouth out and grabbed for the radar key, banging out a report on this. The doctors must have been standing by down at the big station because there was only a slight delay before the answering signal came. Any blood? Another knot added itself to his intestines. I don't know. Don't think so. But I didn't look. Look next time. We're trying to get this related to some of the familiar diseases. It must have some relation. There are only so many ways a man can be sick. We've got a doctor coming over, Adams. Not on the moon, but we're shipping them through. He'll sit down in about 9 hours, and there's some stuff to take on the supply missiles. May not help, but we're trying a mixture of the antibiotics. Also some ACS and anodynes for the itching and rash. Hope they work. Let us know any reaction. Bill cut off. He'd have to try. They were as much in the dark about this as he was, but they had a better background for guessing and trial and error. And if the bugs in him happened to like tachyomycetin, he wouldn't be too much worse off. Damn it, had there been blood? He forced his mind off it, climbed into his clothes, and then into the spacesuit that hung from the grapples. It moved automatically into position, the 2 halves sliding shut and sealing from outside. The big gloves on his hands were too clumsy for such operations. Then he went bounding across the moon, Halfway to the supplies, he felt the itching come back, and he slithered and wriggled around, trying to scratch his skin against his clothing. It didn't help much. He was sweating harder, and his eyes were watering. He manipulated the little visor cleaning gadget, trying to poke his face forward to brush the frustration tears from his eyes. He couldn't quite reach it. There were 3 supply missiles, each holding about 200 pounds, Earth weight. He tied them together and slung them over his back, heading toward his ship. Here they weighed only 100 pounds, and with his own weight and the suit added, the whole load came to little more than his normal weight on Earth. He tried shifting the supplies around on his back, getting them to press against the spots of torment as he walked. It simply unbalanced him without really relieving the itching. Fortunately, though, his eyes were clearing a little. He gritted his teeth and fought back through the powdery pumice surface, kicking up clouds of dust that settled slowly but completely. Though the gravity was low, there was no air to hold them up. Nothing had ever looked better than the airlock of the ship. He let the grapples hook the suit off him as soon as the outer seal was shut and went into a whirling dervish act. Aches and pains could be stood. Itching. Apparently, though, the spray and gargle had helped a little, since his nose felt somewhat clearer, and his eyes were definitely better. He repeated them and then found the medical supplies with a long list of instructions. They were really shooting the pharmacy at him. He injected himself, swallowed things, rubbed himself down with others, and waited. Whatever they'd given him didn't offer any immediate help. He began to feel worse. But on contacting Earth by radar, he was assured that that might be expected. "We've got another missile coming, with metal foil for the maps and photos, plus a small copying camera. You can print them right on the metal, seal that in a can, and leave it for the rocket that's bringing the doctor. The pilot will blast over it. That should sterilize it, and pick it up when it cools." Bill swore, but he was in his suit when the missile landed, heading out across the pumice-covered wastes toward him. The salves had helped to the itching a little, but not much, and his nose had grown worse again. He jockeyed the big supply can out of the torpedo-shaped missile, packed it on his back, and headed for his ship. The itching was acting up as he sweated. This made a real load, about like packing 100 bulky pounds over his normal Earth weight through the soft drift of the pumice. But his nose was clearing again. It was apparently becoming cyclic. He'd have to relay that information back to the medics. And where were they getting a doctor crazy enough to take a chance with him? He climbed out of the suit and went through the ritual of scratching, noticing that his fever had gone up and that his muscles were shaking. His head seemed light, as if he were in for a spell of dizziness. They'd be interested in that back on Earth, though it wouldn't do much good. He couldn't work up a clinical attitude about himself. All he wanted was a chance to get over this disease before it killed him. He dragged out the photo and copying equipment under a red light. It filled what little space was left in his cubbyhole cabin. Then he swore, gulping down more of the pills where they were waiting for him. The metal sheets were fine. They were excellent. The only thing wrong was that they didn't fit his developing trays, and they were tough enough to give him no way of cutting them to size. He stuffed them back in their container and shoved it into the airlock. Then his stomach kicked up again. He couldn't see any blood in the result, but he couldn't be sure. The color of the pills might hide traces. He flushed it down, his head turning in circles, and went to the radar. This time he didn't even wait for a reply. Let them worry about their damned maps. They could send cutting equipment with the doctor and pick up the things later. They could pick up his corpse and cremate it at the same time, for all he cared right now. He yanked out his bunk and slumped into it, curling up as much as the itching would permit. And finally, for the first time, in over 50 hours, he managed to doze off, though his sleep was full of nightmares. It was the sound of the bull-throated chemical rocket that brought him out of it, the sound travelling along the surface through the rocks, and up through the metal ship, even without air to carry it. He could feel the rumble of its takeoff later, but he waited long after that for the doctor. There was no knock on the port. Finally, he pulled himself up from the bunk, sweating and shaking, and looked out. The doctor was there, or at least a man in a spacesuit was. But somebody had been in a hurry for volunteers and given the man no basic training at all. The figure would pull itself erect, make a few strides that were all bounce and no progress, and then slide down into the pumice. Moonwalking was tricky until you learned how. Bill sighed, scratching unconsciously, and made his way somehow out to his suit, climbing into it. He paused for a final good scratch, and then the grapples took over. This time he stumbled also as he made his way across the powdery rubble, but the other man was making no real progress at all. Bill reached him and touched helmets long enough to issue simple instructions through metal sound conduction. Then he managed to guide the other's steps. There had been accounts of the days of learning spent by the first men on the moon, but it wasn't that bad with an instructor to help. The doctor picked up as they went along. Bill's legs were buckling under him by then, and the itches were past endurance. At the end, the doctor was helping him, but somehow they made the ship and were getting out of the suits. Bill first, then the doctor, using the grapples under Bill's guidance. The doctor was young and obviously scared, but fighting his fear. He'd been picked for his smallness to lighten the load on the chemical rocket, and his little face was intent, but he managed a weak grin.
"Thanks, Adams. I'm Dr. Ames. Ted to you. Get onto that cot. You're about out on your feet."
The test he made didn't take long, but his head was shaking at the conclusion.
"Your symptoms make no sense," he summarized. "I've got a feeling some are due to one thing, some to another. Maybe you will have to wait until I come down with it and compare notes."
His grin was wry, but Bill was vaguely glad that he wasn't trying any bedside manner. There wasn't much use in thanking the man for volunteering. Ames had known what he was up against, and he might be scared, but his courage was above thanks. "What about the maps?" Bill asked. "They tell you?"
"They've left cutters outside. I started to bring them, then the pumice got me. I couldn't quite stand upright in it. I'll pick up the maps later, but they're important. The competing ships will claim our territory if we don't file first."
He knocked the dust off his instrument and wiped his hands. Bill looked down at the bed to see a fine film of moon silt there. They'd been bringing in too much on the suits. It was too fine and the traps weren't getting it fast enough. He got up shakily, moving toward the dust trap that had been running steadily. But now it was out of order, obviously, with the fur brushes worn down till they could generate almost no static against the rod. He groped into the supplies, hoping there would be replacements. Ames caught his arm.
"Cut it out, Adams. You're in no shape for this. Hey, how long since you've eaten?"
Bill thought it over, his head thick. "I had coffee before I landed."
Dr. Ames nodded quickly. "Vomiting, dizziness, tremors, excess sweating. What did you expect, man? You put yourself under this strain, not knowing what comes next, having to land with an empty stomach, skipping meals and loading your stomach with pills, and probably no sleep. Those symptoms are perfectly normal."
He was at the tiny galley equipment, fixing quick food as he spoke, but his face was still sober. He was probably thinking of the same thing that worried Bill. An empty stomach didn't make the itching rash, the runny nose and eyes, and the general misery that had begun the whole thing. He sorted through the stock of replacement parts, a few field sisters, suit wadding, spare gloves, cellophane-wrapped gadgets. Then he had it. Ames was over, urging him toward the cot, but he shook him off.
"Gotta get the dust out of here. Dust will make the itching worse. Moon dust is sharp, Doc. Just install new brushes." "What are those instructions? Yeah, insert the cat's fur brushes under the cat's fur. Is that what they use, Doc?" "Sure. It's cheap and generates static electricity. Do you expect sable?"
Bill took the can of soup and sipped it without tasting or thinking, his hand going toward a fresh place that itched. His nose began running, but he disregarded it. He still felt lousy, but strength was flowing through him, and life was almost good again. He tossed the bunk back into its slot, lifted the pilot stool and motioned Ames forward. "You operate a key. Hell, I am getting slow. You can contact Luna Base by phone, have them relay. There. Now tell them I'm blasting off pronto for Earth, and I'll be down in 4 hours with their plans."
"You're crazy."
The words were flat, but there was desperation in the little doctor's face. He glanced about hastily, taking the microphone woodenly.
"Adams, they'll have an atomic bomb up to blast you out before you're near Earth. They've got to protect themselves. You can't."
Bill scratched, but there was the beginning of a grin on his face. "No, I'm not delirious now, though I damn near cracked up. You figured out half the symptoms. Take a look at those brushes, cat's fur brushes, and figure what they'll do to a man who is breathing the air and who is allergic to cats. All I ever had was some jerk in planning who didn't check my medical record with trip logistics. I never had these symptoms until I unzipped the traps and turned them on. It got better whenever I was in the suit, breathing canned air. We should have known a man can't catch a disease from plants." The doctor looked at him, and at the fur pieces he'd thrown into a waste bin, and the whiteness ran from his face. He was seeing his own salvation, and the chuckle began weakly, gathering strength as he turned to the microphone. Cat asthma. Simple allergy. Who figured you'd get that in deep space? But you're right, Bill. It figures. Bill Adams nodded as he reached for the controls, and the tubes began firing, ready to take them back to Earth. Then he caught himself and swung to the doctor. Doc, he said quickly, just be sure and tell them this isn't to get out. If they'll keep still about it, so will I. He'd make a hell of a hero on Earth if people heard of it, and he could use a little of a hero's reward. No catcalls, thanks.
Well, what did you think of that one? In this day of COVID, those symptoms seem vaguely familiar, and if you're like me, you probably thought about that while listening. However, imagine if this was a real trip to Mars, and that actually happened. I doubt that they would have had the pilot set down on Titan. The author of Operation Distress was Lester del Rey. His real name was Leonard Knapp, and he first started publishing stories in the pulp mags in the late 1930s. He was associated with the most prestigious science fiction magazine of the era, Astounding Science Fiction. He continued publishing novels as well as short fiction under his primary pen name, Lester del Rey, as well as a number of other names. His last novel was published by Pinnacle Books in 1978. On a side note, he was also well known for writing Star Trek novels. Ron's Amazing Stories is brought to you by Audible. Discover endless adventures and a 30-day free trial today. You can stream or download thousands of included audiobooks, podcasts, and Audible originals in the Plus catalog. It gives you the power of storytelling anytime, anywhere. Visit audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories to start your journey today. Thank you, Audible. Our next story comes from the SciFi series Dimension X. It is an adventure in time and space where imagination is the only limit. I bring you First Contact, a story that takes you to the furthest reaches of space where humans and aliens meet for the very first time. As our explorers venture into the unknown, they stumble upon a civilization as curious and cautious as their own. What follows is a tale of suspense, discovery, and the delicate dance of diplomacy between two vastly different species. So listen in as we explore the mysteries of the cosmos and the possibilities that lie beyond our understanding. Here is First Contact, and it first aired on September 8th, 1951.
Adventures in time and space, transcribed in future tense. The National Broadcasting Company, in cooperation with Street and Smith, publishers of astounding science fiction, bring you Dimension X.
Tonight's story, First Contact, by Murray Leinster. They had been in space 6 months now, moving with the incredibly faster-than-light speed of the overdrive. In 6 months, they had gone from Earth outward and outward to the crab-like nebula with the twin stars. A routine flight of exploration and scientific research.
Solid object about 90,000 miles away, sir.
Located, Dort. Exactly. Identify it.
A small object, sir. Hey, Captain, I've never seen anything like this before. Whatever it is out there is coming toward us at an incredible speed and retreating to zero just as rapidly.
What's the mass of the object, Dort?
Well, it varies with the distance from us, sir.
Step up the scanners.
Well, nothing, sir. Absolutely nothing shows out there. And yet there must be something. Those alarms are foolproof.
Action stations, man all weapons. Condition of extreme alert in all departments immediately.
Captain, what is it?
Dort, I ran into the same thing once before on the Earth-Mars run. We were being located by another ship, and their locator beam was the same frequency as ours. Every time it hit, it registered as something solid and monstrous.
But, Captain, we're the only Earth ship in 18 light years around. How?
I didn't say it was another Earth ship out there, Dort.
Another race?
That's right. There's a spaceship out there, all right. But it's not manned by human beings.
It had been contemplated and speculated upon. Mathematically, it was almost a certainty that such a race existed. But in 18,000 Earth years, no human spaceship had ever encountered them. Now the situation was precipitated, and somewhere outside the Earth vessel, there was an alien race. Of what shape? Of what quality? Of what psychology?
It's moving, sir. Heading right for us.
At that speed, we'll be in touch in 10 minutes. Heading right for us, huh? Just what we'd do if a strange ship appeared in our hunting grounds. Friendly? Well, maybe. We'll try to contact them. We have to do that. But friendly? Thank the Lord for the blasters.
They may not be hostile, sir.
Well, they may be. That's what I'm paid for. Put on this job for, to worry about the troubles that may never happen. To all hands, now hear this. A ship is approaching manned by an alien race. I'll give the signal for attack or defense if it be necessary. There'll be no move made unless I give the order. I do not wish to provoke trouble. Stand by.
Their ship is slowing down, sir. It's stopped.
Weapons Department, report. Weapons Department, report.
Alien ship remarked. Target fixed. Weapons alert.
Communications Department, report. Communications Department, report.
We're receiving a modulated short wave, sir. Frequency modulated. Apparently a signal. Not enough power to do us any harm.
We'll try to make some sense out of it. Report any progress to me immediately.
One thing in their favor, sir. They didn't attack immediately without question. They're trying to establish contact. That seems to indicate they're reasonable.
We'll see. What are they doing now? Can you make out the locator screen? Bring that power up.
They're doing something now, sir. There's a section of the hull opening. Probably an airlock, sir.
If they breathe there.
They're letting something out. Oh, it's round. A bomb, sir?
Unknown object released from alien ship. Observed by Weapons Department and targeted.
Stand by.
See what they're doing, sir? They've left the object out there right where they were. And now they're withdrawing the ship.
There's no reason why that object couldn't be a bomb, Mr. Dort. Intended to let us think precisely as you're thinking right now.
I just have a hunch, sir. I think they're friendly. I think whatever it is out there is a means of communication.
You're probably right, but I won't gamble the ship on a probability.
Sir, I'd like to volunteer to go out there and look that thing over.
Well, you understand whoever does examine it is expendable.
Yes, sir.
Requisition a lifeboat.
If it's all right with you, sir, I'd prefer just a suit with the drive in it. It's smaller and the arms and legs won't make me look like a bomb. And I'll carry a scanner, sir.
You may leave when you're ready.
Thank you, sir.
I'm all ready. Clear the lock and let me out. Weapons Department reporting to the captain. Mr. Dort located. Mr. Dort is targeted.
Stand by. If that object out there is a device to capture one of our people for observation and questioning, it'll be blown out of existence, including Mr. Dort. Stand by. Mr. Dort. Mr. Dort. Report.
Object, as you can see on the scanner, sir, is covered with many small horns, like the detonating horns of the obsolete mines formerly used in naval warfare.
Is that their purpose, do you assume, Mr. Dort?
I'm going to find out, sir. I'm going to grab one.
Mr. Dort.
I'm here, sir. I don't think this is a mine.
Circle it so we can see it completely through your scanner.
Deadlock, sir. Nothing to report that the scanner hasn't shown you. Oh, wait a minute, sir. A section of the outer hull seems to be opening. Do you see it?
Very good, Dort. Hold that.
I'm sure it's a communications device, sir.
It looks like it. Fix your scanner so it'll focus on that communications device. Return to the ship. Communications Department. Progress report, please.
We've established communication, sir.
Is there a psychologist on the team down there with you?
Yes, sir. Mr. Burns is working with us.
Will both of you please report to the bridge at once? Oh, you look tired, Dort.
We've established fairly satisfactory communication, sir. They seem to have highly developed thought patterns. We got a satisfactory translation from the machine on the 4th attempt. We can say almost anything we want to say to each other now. Of course, how much of what they tell us is the truth, we have no way of knowing.
Mr. Burns, you're the psychologist. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, sir. They seem to be completely direct. They haven't let slip even a hint of the tenseness we know exists. They act as if they were setting up a means of communication for friendly conversation, but, well, there's an overtone that...
Yeah? Well, Mr. Burns, I have a decision to make. On the one hand, opening contact with the friendly people of a vastly different culture could only be beneficial to us of Earth. On the other hand, if they're hostile, I ought to blast them out of existence without any other preliminaries.
Oh, but, sir, you can't...
I'm not talking to you, Dort.
It's not warranted yet, sir.
Yes. Now, hear this, all departments. Hear this, all departments. This ship is on an extended alert. Provisions will be made so that personnel can have maximum rest and nourishment.
Communication continued by means of the artificial language set up arbitrarily between the Earthmen and the aliens, decoded by the mechanical decoders. Dort disobeyed orders. He lived on powerful stimulants so that he could stay with the communications machine. Talking to the aliens.
Other people. Are we being received?
We are receiving your message.
The chief of this ship wishes to speak with the chief of your ship.
The message is heard by the chief of this ship. The chief of this ship communicates that he will hear the message of the chief of that ship.
Go ahead, sir.
People of the other ship, I'd like to say the appropriate things about this first contact of two dissimilar civilized races, and of my hopes that a friendly intercourse between the two peoples will result.
People of that ship, what you say is all very well, but is there any way for us to let each other go home alive?
That's all, sir. They've stopped sending.
Very direct people. Very direct.
But, sir, I don't follow. I didn't know what that meant. You know, is there any way for us to let each other go home alive?
It means what it says, Dort.
Sir, what's to stop us from just cutting communication and leaving, and they can do likewise?
What's to stop us? Simply that whichever ship leaves first will be followed by the other. If they find Earth and get back to their own planet and we don't know where that planet is, Earth will be completely at their mercy. If they leave first, we'll follow them. We'll attempt to find their home planet. Dort, could you swear to any decision that the policymakers on Earth will come to?
Sir, even if they do follow us, the closer we get to home, the more of our ships and weapons they'll face. They'd never get away.
Well, how do you know that they can't communicate with their home planet without returning?
We can't, sir.
How do you know they can't?
I don't, sir.
So that's the situation. We'll sit out here, facing each other, trying to outguess each other, until time wears us out. And we'll have to face the fact. Either they destroy us or we destroy them. Navigation officer, attention. Navigation officer, attention. Every star map on this ship is to be prepared for instant destruction.
The chief of this ship wishes to know whether the chief of that ship can suggest an answer to the problem concerning us both.
Do you want me to answer that, sir?
I'll answer it myself. Tell me when to talk.
Now, sir.
I am giving that matter personal attention. Every effort will be bent to the solution of this problem. will you consider a temporary truce in the meantime?
What would a truce gain? Could we trust you? Would you trust us? I suggest that we continue as we have up to this particle of time.
I agree. Sign off, George.
Weeks went by, and during the weeks, the exchange of information continued without let-up.
What particle of time are the people on that ship at?
The resting time. All rest except myself and others on alert duty.
Same on this ship.
You people of that ship are very similar in many ways. Do you have a family?
I have a mate.
I have a mate and 3 offspring. It is too bad for them, as well as us, to have to kill each other.
This ship can't see any way out of it. Can that ship?
If we could believe each ship, yes. Our chief would like it. But we can't believe you, and you are afraid that we do not tell truth, although we do. This ship would trail you home if this ship were able to. That ship would do the same. But this ship feels sorry about it.
I believe you're a friend.
I share your belief and like you. But there is a possibility that you were put to make a trap for me. I will stop now and think it over.
Just sit down, Dort. Control yourself. We're all under tension. Doesn't do any good to pace like some caged animal.
Yes, sir.
All right, now, I've read the complete transcription of your conversations with this one alien. What does it prove, Dort?
Sir, these people are so much like us in their thinking and... Well, sir, they're likable.
They're likable and they breathe oxygen. Their air is 28% oxygen instead of 20. But they could do very well on Earth. It'd be a highly desirable conquest for them. Dort, I'm as set against violence as you are. I don't see any way out of this. And I think we've got to break this status quo. So if in 70 hours we don't see any other way, then I have no further choice. I'll blow them to bits.
Will that ship receive communications? Will that ship receive communications?
This ship is listening.
It seems to me better to communicate than to sit by the machine silently.
I would have called you, but you signed off before.
The problem goes around and around. I find no answer.
Perhaps we could turn our thoughts to other things.
The psychologist of this ship tells us that you people on that ship have a threshold of tolerance to tension. He tells us that you will be forced to take one action or another in a period of less than 100 time particles.
I have no communication on this matter.
Well, this ship is not trying to extract unwilling information from that ship. A truth is mentioned in passing.
A report of this conversation will be carried to the chief of this ship.
It would be so. We are prepared.
If only the people of this ship could meet in direct contact with the people of that ship, it might be better.
We could not communicate then. The communications machine is too large to carry from place to place. In direct contact, the peoples of the two ships would be further apart than now.
That's true.
I am sad. Much that is pleasant has passed between us.
I am sad, too.
We are not yet ready for each other.
We are not yet ready for each other.
It's hard, isn't it, Dort?
Well, Captain, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were here, sir.
I've been here for quite a while. Eavesdropping, I'm afraid.
It's all right, sir. Nothing can be personal in a situation like this.
Yeah, that's right. How long is 100 time particles, Dort?
Pardon, sir?
That reference he made to us not being able to stand tension is interesting. Their psychologists seem to make more out of us than we do out of them, don't they?
Yes, sir. They hit the nail right on the head.
Yes, they did. I think, Dort, we'll just have to push our timetable up a bit. No further communication with the aliens under any circumstances. That's clear, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Sir, if they know so much about our psychology, isn't it possible that remark was intended to make us act more quickly?
Probable, Dort. Probable.
Well, why would they do that, sir? Why?
You tell me why, Dort.
All of a sudden, I have an idea, sir. That's crazy.
It doesn't matter how crazy. I'll listen to it.
Sir, I think these people are playing some kind of a joke on us.
Joke? A joke, Dort?
Yes, sir. Over and over again, I've noticed what I think is a sense of humor. A highly developed sense of humor. Do you recall when we went to all the trouble to set up a fictitious star map and then they just sent us back a mirror image of the same one? I think somehow they're playing a joke on us.
Well, maybe you're right. In which case, you've seen practical jokers, Dort. Their jokes aren't always funny. Sometimes they hurt people. All departments, man, instant alert. All departments, man, instant alert. Report instantly. Report instantly.
Weapons Department alerted.
Target, the enemy ship.
On target, sir.
Stand by. Fire!
They're gone, sir. Not a trace of them left. Not a tiny trace. Now we can go home.
Communications to Captain. Communications to Captain.
Report.
Sir, I'm picking up new signals. Same frequency as the original alien signals.
That's impossible. That ship was destroyed.
I'm receiving signals, sir.
Set the machine up. We'll be down there in a minute. Mr. Dort, come with me, please.
It's good to be on the way home.
Yes, it is good.
Do you suppose we'll ever figure out what happened to the other ship?
Never. A blinding flash and they were gone.
I suppose they couldn't figure a way out of the situation. An unstable people. They had no sense of humor to cope with the situation. They exploded themselves out of existence.
It seems reasonable.
They must have had powerful weapons to destroy themselves so completely.
Yes, what a shame.
In a way, I grew to like them.
This isn't meant for us, sir. I don't know what's happening, but I think we're overhearing a private conversation.
I understand, Dort. Be quiet, will you?
Many things might have come out of a relationship with that people.
They were describing a disease they call cancer. I think it is similar to the Frogren syndrome. We might have helped them.
They might have helped us, too. Well, too bad. We'll never find them again, I think. The odds of such a chance meeting in the vast space of the whole universe. There are no figures for such odds, are there?
Turn it up, Dort. Turn it up louder.
That's all there is, sir. The signal stopped there. Sir, I don't know how, but somehow when we fired at them, we didn't destroy them, but we did set up a condition whereby they've become invisible to us and we've become invisible to them.
Captain to Engineering Department. Halt forward motion.
Captain, why are we stopping?
Listen, Dort, you say they're invisible. All right, they are. But they're not destroyed because we just heard them. They're out there somewhere. Invisible.
Well, you heard them, sir. They're heading for home. We're invisible to them, too, sir.
How do you know, Dort? How do you know this whole thing isn't a setup?
Well, suppose that's true, Captain. You heard their conversation. They weren't talking like any monstrous people. They seemed decent and warm, just as decent and warm as we are.
How do you know this conversation wasn't planted, deliberately set up for us to hear? How do you know that, Dort?
Yes, sir, you're right. They may be out there and they may not. They may be telling the truth or they may be trying to trick us. They may be friends or they may be the most deadly enemies.
You said they had a sense of humor, Dort. What a joke to play. To deliberately set up a situation where we wouldn't know fact from fantasy, truth from lie. Wouldn't that be a joke, Dort?
Yeah, but we don't know that they did that, sir.
And we don't know that they didn't. We don't know anything.
Sir? Does that mean we never go home again?
I don't know. I have to think about it. I have to think about it.
You have just heard another adventure into the unknown world of the future. The world of...
Dimension X.
Well, that is not the first time that we've had this story on the show. However, the other version aired on X-1 and had a completely different ending. But the results were the same. Would you risk going home? Do you think the whole concept is rather silly? I myself am not so sure. I would love to hear what you think. Dimension X was an NBC radio program broadcast mostly on a unsponsored sustaining basis in 1950 and 1951. The first 13 episodes were broadcast live, and so they are lost to time. The rest of the stories were pre-recorded and can be found on the Internet Archive. 50 episodes of the series survived. Later, NBC's X-1, 1955 through 58, utilized many of the same actors and scripts, hence why we are playing this one a second time. I hope you enjoyed it.
Boxer Ben fights hard and fair, so in the ring you kids beware. He's dynamite because he knows he's got go power from Cheerios. Yes, he's got go power. There he goes. He's feeling his Cheerios, Cheerios, Cheerios.
That makes sense. Try Cheerios, the wonderful oat cereal that's shaped like a little letter O, and you'll agree. You like that delicious toasted oat flavor, and Cheerios is ready to eat. Just pour out a big bowl full, add good fresh milk, dig in, and start getting your go power. Because a Cheerios breakfast is full of vitamins, proteins, and minerals, and those are the good things you need to help build red blood, healthy bodies, and strong muscles. So enjoy your breakfasts every day with delicious Cheerios and milk, and get that good go power. Then folks will say...
He's feeling his Cheerios.
That was episode number 675, and I hope that you enjoyed the show. Remember, Ron's Amazing Stories is brought to you by Audible. Head to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories today. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button helps us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.